Hi, my name is Jeff Poggi. I'm the co-CEO of the McIntosh Group. We design, produce, and market high-end audio video products for both the consumer market as well as the automotive market. And that's the area of my focus for this topic. Yeah, I do believe that human-centric design for AI is really vital for the successful propagation of AI into society. Right now, I think humans are very comfortable being the masters of machines. We've designed machines to be our tools and our servants, and that's been since the Industrial Revolution. But now it's an interesting kind of moment in time where we're looking at machines to not just be our servants, but actually to be our peers and potentially even to be our advisors. And so that's a pretty major inflection point. I think in the state of technology and also the relationships of people with that technology and how we interact with that. And humans are very sensitive beasts. We are very emotional. We have relationships with everything around us. And so the idea of this sort of human-centric design for AI, I think, is the right notion, because we have to come at it from that perspective of how does it impact the person, the individual, in an appropriate way, in order to build a fulfilling relationship between sort of the man and the device. I think there's a couple ways to look at that. I think on the technology front, a big barrier is really about the sensors that are going to give us the data we need to make AI effective in a human-centric way. We need to have as much data about people and about their experiences in order to have highly effective AI engines to be able to produce interesting results for us. For instance, we need biometric data, we need voice data, we need visual data for facial recognition, and all of these sensors have to provide us the data in a very, very high credibility way that's repeatable and robust, so that we're not making bad decisions off of bad data. So I think that the evolution of the quality of those input devices is going to be a key enabler to sort of successful AI propagation in a humanistic way. Equally important, though, is the privacy of personal data. So as we are asking people to give us data in order to build better algorithms, to make better predictions and to make better decisions, people will want to make sure that that data is being treated properly and not being used for any sort of malicious intent or any ill-conceived intent. And people are obviously very sensitive with their personal data. And we're really crossing a bridge that we've not crossed before, because it's much more personal in nature, the data we're asking for. It's not just your name, address, and social security number. We're now looking for your face or your voice, which gets obviously a little bit more intimate. And that, I think that's going to become a key challenge, is how do we face the need to get massive amounts of personal data in order to build high quality AI engines, at the same time treating that data with a high degree of respect for the individual. I think so. As developers are creating AI engines, how will they treat people's data is going to be a key. I think a key enabler, a key unblock for proper propagation of AI engines. And I think one of the key notions there is one, to give people a confidence level in an explainable AI engine that people will understand why the results is the results, or why the recommendation is the recommendation, because the AI engine has done it in an easily explainable way. There's companies like Rulex, whose tagline is AI that tells you why, which is really all about breaking down the AI engine into a series of sort of if-then statements that can be very simply translated to the users so that they understand why the results are the results. And if you can make it rational to people, then I think it's going to be easier to adopt it than if you just come out with a result that doesn't have any sort of clear explanation for why that result is the result. So the role of government, let's say, versus the role of business in data privacy for human-centric AI is a great topic. And I think if we look at other industries as sort of examples, and we look at the automotive industry, which is a fairly highly regulated industry for everything from safety measures to carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide output from a green perspective. So there's lots of regulations in the automotive industry that the industry is subjected to. I think that's going to be probably a peer for what we're going to get to with data privacy. Even though business would like to be able to say we're going to do it in a consortium fashion of creating a standard set of rules that everyone will follow, which I believe can get us a lot of good results by having businesses work collaboratively together to define frameworks to work within. And I think that's a great starting point that hopefully will then influence legislation. But I just don't believe it's realistic for businesses to expect the governments not to have a point of view in this, and probably one that's more heavy-handed than we want. But I think it's a practical reality that is, similar to that automotive example. Personally, I'm an optimist from a perspective of the future of human-centric AI. I mean, I think if we look back at various technical revolutions over time, every new technology has met with angst, whether it was cars taking over railways, or the electricity being deployed throughout the country, or airplane flight. there's a lot of stress at the beginning of a new sort of technology unlock. And eventually, people become more and more accustomed to that technology and get more and more familiar with it. And therefore, it propagates and is used more readily. I think AI is at the very front end of that, right? Most of the AI systems that we are comfortable with today are really these level one systems that we see in the human-centric AI framework. They've become part of our lives already. We don't think of them maybe so much as AI, but they're around us today. And so I think it's going to take time. I think I'm an optimist, but I'm a realist on a timing perspective. Is the technology developers always expect technology to happen much, much faster than it actually does. The electric car was supposed to be widespread, a decade ago. And here we are still with less than a few percent of new car purchases are electric cars. So the technical adoption often is a much slower curve, but it doesn't mean the technology is not going to happen. It's just going to go through its fits and starts. And as different barriers then get knocked down, it will continue to propagate. And I think the future is very bright. I think humans generally embrace technologies that help them live their lives in a more enjoyable way. And I think fundamentally, that's what human-centric AI is all about. It's trying to help us as consumers do tasks that maybe are menial or not fun or unenjoyable in a better way. And therefore, we will embrace those things when they have sort of crossed all the other barriers that they need to, so that the benefits outweigh the cost, which I think is fundamentally the ultimate driver of the speed of adoption. Yeah, how do you bring in consumers into sort of the development of AI so that they are enablers of it instead of maybe barriers of it? It's an interesting notion. If I use an example from our industry specifically, a very simple example of a sort of a level one AI system in the audio space right now is playlists that your music service provides you, right? They, whether you use Spotify or Pandora or Apple Music or whatnot, they will provide you a playlist based on their recommendations, based on your past music listening experiences. And they'll do the mix for you. And that's a very simple algorithm in the background that's looking at what you've consumed in the past and sort of serving up a new menu for you. You can imagine that becoming a much more interesting, interactive process if you could get more of that human data or that more of that consumer data. If I knew your mood, if I could sense your facial responses, and try to predict what your feelings were, if I had your biometric data and understood if you were in a relaxed mood or if you were in an excited mood, then I could do a better job serving you up a playlist based on this new set of inputs. So I think that could be something that some consumers could get really excited about, because they could probably see the benefit of it to them pretty directly. The question is, will they see that benefit outweighing the cost of having to give up that personal data? And that's, I think, the key question we're going to have to unlock. Is there's going to be some consumers that say absolutely yes. Those are the early adopters that will jump into technology and allow us to start creating this new benefit for consumers. And then you hope that once that becomes accepted by a certain part of society, that others will then jump in and recognize the benefit for themselves as well. One of the interesting challenges with that is if you're building AI engines or AI decision making based on a set of early adopters who are giving you the data that allows you then to sort of perfect and build your algorithms, the real question is that data a statistically viable set of data, or is it based on a subset of the population that causes your algorithms to be highly biased? Is it all white males that are giving you their data, and then as all of a sudden black females start to want to enter into this use case, the recommendations are going to be terrible. So those are some interesting challenges that we have to face as we start trying to create these new services with a human-centric AI approach, both getting the data and then also making sure that it represents a fair part of the population. I think trust is a critical component to how it's one of those critical obstacles right now of preventing human-centric AI. Building trust with consumers, I do believe, starts fundamentally with transparency. And you have to have an honest, authentic conversation, right, with your consumers so that they know exactly what's going on. The challenge with that is, unfortunately, the legal system makes it really, really hard for businesses. There's not one of us that has ever read all the disclosures to your music service agreement that you sign when you sign up for Spotify or Apple Music or whatever it may be. The length of these disclosures are mind-numbing. And in that those, while they may seem simple and people basically write them off today, the transaction of the future, if it's about sharing more of my personal data, I probably need to understand what's going to happen with my personal data a little more. And will I so quickly sign off on that? So we need to find a way to really bring the sort of the legal framework down to a very simple, easily digestible, understandable level so that it's not too complex, because that's what will scare people away, is if they feel that there's this big heavy arm, this big heavy hand that's going to be controlling their information. I think certain companies do a really good job at establishing trust with their consumers. Companies like Patagonia, I think, is a hallmark in this regard, which just has a very honest conversation about what they do and what they don't do and why they do it. And I think a lot of companies can learn from that. And I think we're all going to be challenged to be more transparent like that in order to build that trust with consumers. And I think we're also going to have to admit our mistakes, because mistakes will happen, right? And problems will occur in any technology deployment. There's always challenges. And so when those mistakes happen, owning those mistakes, taking the responsibility and quickly fixing them is going to be a key part to maintaining that trust. McIntosh Group right now, we're applying AI in a couple different domains. I'd say it's very basic level one AI right now. Certainly, we're using some computer modeling optimization type software in the design development of products. But from the human-centric perspective, really more focused on users, there's equalization for your your room, if you will, whether you're in the home or in the car. So to make the sound perfect for that environment. That's a current functionality feature set of the product today that consumers are very comfortable with. But that's also a functionality that can go a lot further in the future and become much more sophisticated, that will depend on really the propagation of more of these sensors across the environment of the home. So you could imagine, if you had an audio system in your home, and you had the ability to have video surveillance in the home, so you knew how many people were in a room. You could adjust the sound profile based on the number of people in the room, or where are they sitting in the room. You could adjust the sound profile as people are moving from room to room if you have a whole home audio system, so that basically the sound moves with the audience as the audience moves throughout the home. So there's a number of new ways that we could imagine this technology to expand, that's going to be enabled by sort of the propagation of sensors throughout the home, and the ability to analyze that data and then to optimize your audio system for the home. So we're kind of excited about that. The other thing that I think is an interesting, I guess, potential use case would be a motion capture, if you will. So what is the emotion of the consumer? So if I'm coming into the house and I'm in a relaxed mood, and I know that I'm in a relaxed mood because I was just listening to some smooth jazz in the car on the way home from work at a fairly low volume level. How do I sort of bring that mood to the user as they come into the home? So how do I adapt lighting, music, blinds, the whole home ecosystem can be adapted to the mood of the user based on how they're entering the house. And then vice versa, as I'm leaving the house and I'm going into the car, how do I bring my mood from my home into my car as I make that transition? So I think those are some interesting challenges and unlocks for us to be able to do. I think to really make AI human-centric, one of the interesting concepts, I think, is to also make AI then about the human or about the consumer, not about the device. So the challenge for industry is I may have AI in my Samsung refrigerator. I may have AI in my BMW car. I may have AI in my Apple phone, but I don't want those devices to be controlling my experience. I want them to be working seamlessly together so that they can give me the optimal sort of performance or the optimal benefit to me as an individual, regardless of sort of where I'm at and all the different devices around me. Our consumer HMI sort of design philosophy for McIntosh has really long been about tactile feel of buttons, of knobs, sort of the quality of craftsmanship in a physical way. That's been a key part of it, along with of course, the look, the industrial design, the look, the color, the palette, etc. That's really important to us. But as we move forward into a human-centric AI world, how does that user interface change? And I think it really changes from a tactile world to a voice world. And I think we're just at the infancy of voice today. even though there's millions and millions of Echoes and Dots and Google Home Assistants, on the market today, people are just starting to get familiar with having conversations or having, let's say, vocal commands with devices. That hasn't propagated to many products, yet. And part of it is around, I think, the key barrier of natural language processing. I think humans have adapted to use physical buttons and knobs over the years, and it becomes very natural. Voice is not yet a natural input device. It's uncomfortable for most people, especially if I can't speak as I'm speaking today and in a normal sort of human way. If I have to adjust my speaking pattern to be more like a computer data input. If we look at cars, for example, for many years, and it's been a decade now, there's been voice input for controlling your radio, your HVAC systems in your cars. And those voice inputs have largely been terrible. They've required users to speak sort of in a directory tree structure, right? I have to say heat up 3 degrees, or I have to say source FM 107.2. If you don't say the specific commands in the right order, you don't get the function. And then you get frustrated and you go back to hitting your buttons and knobs again. And so I think that the key unlock really gets to that natural language processing. When we can talk to our devices like they are our friends and family, then that really enables a whole new, I think, HMI sort of UI interface for a lot more devices than you currently see. Yeah, I think in the safety, security, human rights aspect of AI is obviously very important. And I think from our personal perspective, we're very cautious as a company in general. And so we, because of that, we will not be a trailblazer in this domain. We will be sort of observing others as they progress and then trying to adopt and implement best practices, because we take a very, very conservative approach to that today, and trying to respect all of the privacy laws and GDPR and everything around the world. So it's going to, for us, it's just going to be a slow process forward, and really about reading and watching the rest of the industry move forward and trying to adopt the best practices as they emerge. So in regards to consumers' mindsets and expectations for products working sort of out of the box versus having to be part of the learning process as an AI system sort of learns and matures, I'm going to think more of, Clayton Christensen and some of the other interesting writers who have talked about innovation in the past and how it propagates out through the markets. There's going to be early adopters that jump into the technology because they love the technology for technology's sake. And they are absolutely willing to be that bleeding edge consumer who is okay with the bugginess, is okay with some software updates that have to happen on a daily basis. They love the thrill of the new gadget, right? The new benefit that they're getting is just, it's absolutely worth the pain. They will always be there, but they're a very small minority, and that's not going to create a sustainable business. the industry isn't going to change consumers' behaviors. I'm sorry, I don't believe that is actually a possible thing. I believe consumers will change the industry's behaviors, because consumers are ultimately the ones with the power. And the consumers will basically follow a very similar migration pattern that I think they've followed in other technologies, and that you'll have a small few that adopt early. You'll have others that start getting into the technology as the benefits emerge and the quality improves. And then many years later, you'll get mass adoption once it's truly a mature, sustainable technology. If we as an industry expect AI to propagate in a different way, I think we have a problem as an industry, because I don't think consumers will allow us to do that. Yeah, the idea of AI being limited to people with lesser means or lower countries with lower GDP per capita, because it's maybe could be an expensive technology to roll out. It's something to think about, but I honestly don't believe that is a primary concern. I think that if we look at most technologies, there's often a trickle-down effect where the technology comes out in higher-priced products first, eventually goes through a technology cost efficiency curve, and becomes more widely available as the technology comes down that cost curve, and then gets mass adoption. I don't see why that's necessarily a negative to AI, with the one exception of being able to get a proper cross section of data that is representative of that higher end first product. I think that because you need big data, because we need more consumers to engage with the product in order to build a more credible engine, that's going to make it a little bit more tricky. But that's going to be, one of the problems that I guess businesses are going to have to adapt to, either with focus groups or specific sort of target market entries that they pursue. But I think that it's going to be hard to fight that natural sort of process of a top-down sort of trickle-down technology rollout. I do believe that marketing AI and human-centric AI properly is a critical success factor, right, for the adoption to mass consumers. Marketing that's focused on text and specs is going to fail. And if we keep the marketing focused on, honestly, the engineers, right, that are developing the technologies, it's going to be a very difficult rollout. We got to think about this in the terms of consumer benefits. We got to start with the idea of how is this going to impact the emotions and the experience of the consumer, and give them realistic examples of how that's going to impact their lives. Show them the truth. How is this going to impact you? How is this going to benefit you? And what's the experience going to be? What's the emotions going to be by using this product or service? That's the way we need to do it. And it has to be done in an authentic way. There's a lot of marketing today that's sort of the hype marketing, right? That is about a bit of overpromise, about creating this super product that is, too good to be true maybe sometimes. And if the companies approach AI in that way, I think it's going to cause extreme resistance from consumers who are going to be disappointed, because most of the benefits of AI are not going to be tangible benefits that you can see. I think a lot of them are going to be about either freeing up my time, making things more convenient for me, maybe improving my experience, and these things that aren't necessarily tangible physical things, therefore can lend themselves to be more easily hyped than things that are more tangible. So we have to be really cautious on that. I think maybe the one other thing I've been thinking about in regards to human-centric AI is the adoption rate. And what is that adoption rate? And I was trying to think of other technologies and their adoption rate over time. And one thing that made me pause was I was looking at an article about the different types of audio devices that are offered in cars. And I was surprised to learn that cassette tapes were still offered in Lexus 2010 model year cars. That is a pretty interesting statistic to me, considering companies stopped producing cassette tapes in 2002. So the technology adoption curve, let's say, of media in cars for audio systems is extremely slow. CD players are still common in cars today. They started phasing out in 2015, 2016. Most of us have long not owned cassette tapes, and most of us have long stopped using CDs. So simple, what we may look back now as simple technology adoptions, taken a long, long time. And I think that the hype around AI is so great right now that there could be a bit of a dissatisfaction with the speed of adoption, because it's probably going to take a lot longer than we think.